You're with me, Riza Zulkifli, and this is Business Awani, and we'll be talking to Datuk Shahrul Morsani of Khazanah Research Institute on their latest report on the housing affordability in Malaysia. Now, recently, Khazanah released a report or research on the housing affordability in Malaysia, which concluded that most or all or a lot of the houses in Malaysia are quite unaffordable or severely unaffordable, with the exception of Melaka. And I would like to read a passage from this research, the concluding remarks of this research, which stated that the trends in Malaysia suggest that both the bottom 40% and the middle 40% of household income earners are likely to end up in some form of social housing if the relevant interventions are not made urgently. So I think that is quite an urgent plea to look at the housing affordability in Malaysia. Thank you very much, Datuk Shahrul, for joining us. I think we want to look at first housing affordability in Malaysia, where we are and what we can learn from others. And I think a lot of discussions on housing affordability are usually led by property developers. They are bigger, they are more collected, and they are more united in that sense. Demands of homeowners and home buyers are usually sidelined or not loud enough in that sense. What do we do, or what do we need to create policies that are more geared towards homeowners or home buyers moving forward?
Thank you, and thank you for having me on this show. Yes, our report was on housing affordability, and it's important that we call it affordability, not house prices, because affordability isn't just the house price, but it's the ratio of the house price to people's income. And you're right, the debate at the moment is a difficult one, because getting information on what's really happening is always hard. And one of the things we tried to do in this book is, first of all, to set up where are we today? I mean, is housing really that unaffordable? And so you mentioned just now concepts of seriously unaffordable, moderately unaffordable, etc. So there's a kind of global definition of what constitutes affordable housing, and that is 3 times median income, 3 times annual median income. So a housing market is deemed affordable if the median house price, that's the middle house price, is about 3 times the median household income. So it's median being, again, the halfway mark of households. So in Malaysia, as a whole, in the whole country, it's more than 4 times, which makes it unaffordable by any stretch. So that really is what our report starts to look at. And you're right. And after that, we then analyze why prices are high, and then we have some policy recommendations.
But what about homeowners or home buyers, creating policies geared more towards them? What are the steps, or what do we need to create more policies looking at plights of the homeowners and home buyers?
Right. So what we looked at, and we, having found that houses are unaffordable in many parts of the country, and again, I have to stress this, right? It's not everywhere that houses are unaffordable, because we have different housing markets. You've got a housing market in Kuala Lumpur, which is, very dense, very urbanized, and you have a housing market in less urbanized states of Malaysia. So, but looking at the problem areas, particularly Kuala Lumpur and Penang, something has to be done, because house prices there are well over 5 times median income, which is high, but of course not as high as some other countries. I mean, Hong Kong has got a terrible ratio, it's 17 times, but we don't want to wait till we get to 17 times before we do anything about it. So the kind of policies we're looking at is, first of all, finding out what's causing it. And standard economics says there's demand,
supply as well.
And there's supply, right? So if demand rises, prices tend to rise. But if you make supply elastic, in other words, that a responsive supply, then prices won't rise that much. If supply is inelastic, or in this case vertical, that means price volume. You don't build more houses as a response, then prices will shoot up. So we think that the long-term structural way to solve this problem is to make housing supply more elastic. In other words, having a more responsive housing sector.
Let's talk about housing supply in the next few segments that we have. But let's look at countries with the highest percentage of home ownership. We have first Romania, 95%, Lithuania, 92%, Singapore at 90%, something or a country country that maybe we can relate to or we can learn from. China, 90%. How did they achieve this? And what can we learn from maybe Singapore and China in terms of managing or providing home ownership for people of that particular country?
Well, actually, housing ownership in Malaysia is quite high. I'm just going to quote from our report. It's well over, it's about 70%, which is you know, it's about 72.5%, which is you know, very good. I mean, again, just to quote from here, US only 66% own their houses. But house ownership is a difficult thing to measure in Malaysia, because if you look at the numbers from the Department of Statistics, we have over 7 million houses in Malaysia. According to NAPIC, which is the National Property Information Center, there are only about 4 million or so houses. So it's a 3 million gap. And the reason there's a 3 million gap is that the houses which are counted by NAPIC, or the National Property Information Center, are formal houses. That means houses built in urban areas where you have development order, you have certificate CF, and etc. But you know, a lot of people in Malaysia don't live in urban areas. They live in the rural areas, the countryside. And in the countryside, you don't need the same kind of formality in your housing. So it's very difficult to measure, you know, the kind of idea of housing ownership. But nevertheless, if you look at everywhere, we reckon, according to the Department of Statistics, you know, well over 70% of Malaysians own their house. So that's a reasonable number.
And do you think because of the lack of data that there is this pressure to increase home prices because of that?
It's not so much the lack of data, which there is. There is a lack of data, but it's this idea that, you know, supply doesn't move fast enough. When people want more houses, instead of there being more houses being built, not enough houses are being built. And because not enough houses are being built fast enough, then the price of every house gets, you know, pushed up.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, let's talk about how we can maybe increase supply of houses and also manage demand moving forward. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk to Dato' Sharul Murzaani on housing affordability in Malaysia. Hi, welcome back. With me is Dato' Sharul Murzaani of Khazanah Research Institute, discussing housing affordability in Malaysia based on Khazanah Research Institute's latest report. So let's talk about the supply side of the houses in Malaysia, because you mentioned that if we manage the supply side, we might be able to reduce pressure to house prices in Malaysia. How do we do that? Because I think right now, based on your report, there is a part where it states there that the property developers churn out properties which are priced maybe higher than the demand price in that sense. Is this something that we should look at seriously moving forward?
Yes, we should look at supply. Now, if you look at some of the more unaffordable housing markets, Kuala Lumpur, for example, and you know, we have a chart in our book which shows the kind of property launches made in 2014, and most of them are at the high end, 500,000 and above, and 1 million and above. Now, obviously, there is a market for those houses, but unfortunately, the vast majority of the population cannot afford those houses. So, when we say we want a responsive housing sector, we would like to see supply of houses at all price points, and that does happen. So if you look at Malacca, which has actually a very affordable housing sector, and you look at the property launches in Malacca, they were all at different price points, which meant that different people could afford those houses. But getting back to what you said earlier about how to make the supply more responsive, really it looks at quite structural changes in the way the housing industry is run. To give you an example, the way we run our construction industry is very much rooted in the colonial way of running a housing industry. So you have architects, you have engineers, you have quantity surveyors, and you have contractors, etc., etc., etc. Most other countries have moved away from that. What they try to do is to have everybody work together and come up with far more
Efficient
designs, that's right, efficient designs. So we give an example of the Philippines in our report. It's a company which we studied called 8990 Holdings. Now that's a remarkable company because they can build a house in 2 weeks.
Oh.
In 2 weeks, right? And they do this because they've reorganized the way in which they build houses. A lot of people have talked about industrial built system or prefabricated houses or prefabrication. And in a sense, that's what they're doing in the Philippines. But they're doing it in a Philippines way. So it's not like you have to import a very expensive patented system from another country, but you develop something which is suitable for our country. But if you imagine Lego blocks, right? If we could design our houses around Lego blocks, I mean, I'm using Lego blocks not metaphorically, right? Not for real. I'm not saying we really should use Lego blocks, but imagine we could break everything down into Lego blocks and we design our houses. So when an architect designs a house or a developer designs a house or anybody comes up with a house, he designs the house on the basis that it must be built using those Lego blocks. Then if we have all those Lego blocks around the way and people get efficient in using those Lego blocks, then we could have houses built much faster.
Have you spoken to any property developers?
We have. And
what's the response that you got so far?
We're very pleased because, for example, in Singapore, they use prefabrication or industrial built systems quite a lot. And the way they've done it in Singapore is the government says that, keeps raising the bar in terms of buildability of the house. So, every year the government says you must do more and more industrial built systems. So many Malaysian developers have experience of that in Singapore, and they're all for it because there is something quite, wasteful, or I shouldn't say wasteful, but there's a lot of efficiency gains which could be made in our housing sector, and we need to do that. We need to do that because if we don't, right, we'll just have this problem of demand rising and rising and rising, and supply not catching up with it.
You've mentioned that one of the cause of the rising prices in the research is the fact that our population is continuously rising, as you mentioned just now.
That's right.
And how soon can we maybe look at cutting the building process shorter and shorter and shorter so that we can actually meet the demand of the rising population in Malaysia? Can we look at using the technologies that you've mentioned as soon as next year or the year after?
The technologies exist. CIBD has been promoting this for a while, but I think we've reached a point where it becomes very important that we do something and reform, make the structural changes. Getting back to your point about the rising population, that is true. One big factor is rising population. More people requires more houses. The second factor is urbanization. People are moving from the countryside, from rural areas to the town areas, so you need to build houses for them in the town areas. The third one is the size of households. Now in 1970, the average household had 5.5 people. So that means for every 1,000 people, you probably need about 180 plus houses. By 2020, the size of households will shrink. There will only be 4 people per household. So for every 1,000 people, you need 250 houses. So we have a double whammy here. Population is growing, and we're requiring more houses for any given number of people.
Before we take a short break, I'm just going to ask this question, whether this issue of affordable housing, a home ownership, is only exclusive to Malaysia, or we see in other Southeast Asian countries as well, looking at how we have a bigger growing middle class and growing population within this particular region. Is this something that we should look forward to in the future?
Housing affordability is an issue, I think, globally, and there are many global conferences about it. And if you read the domestic or international press, you can find other countries are facing the same problem. And but it is something we have to do it. But on the plus side, though, the housing industry is a very big industry. Employs a lot of people. It contributes a lot to GDP. So if we can make that more efficient, it has many positive economic benefits. What we shouldn't do is look at affordable housing as a social welfare issue. It shouldn't be a question of government subsidy and more subsidy and more subsidy, because we can't possibly subsidize the housing needs of 80% of the population. We'll always need to look after the people who are the least well off, who can never be able to afford a house. But for the majority of the population, we must find a market solution where houses are built in a way at a price point which enough people can afford.
So instead of looking at giving, in this case, monetary subsidies, we should look at the policies, the underlying policies moving forward to look at or to address housing affordability issues in Malaysia.
That's right. A change in the structural change in the system, and but we have to do it. We have to do something. Right? We have to do something, and the solution cannot be government giving money to people to buy houses.
Okay, let's take another short break. When we come back, let's talk about future trends, because I think we have to move forward, and whether when we move forward, the traditional definition of a house will still apply. Because I think right now we're still looking at 20 by 70, landed property, 3 bedrooms minimum. So do we still need to look at that in the future, or should we start changing and look at creating affordability through technology and maybe smaller living spaces? Let's talk about that in a while. Hi, we're talking to Datuk Shahrul Mozani of Khazanah Research Institute on housing affordability in Malaysia. Third part, we'll discuss about understanding future needs and creating a sustainable solution moving forward. So let's talk about the generation that we are looking at right now, future home owners or future home buyers. We're looking at a generation that can get, they don't have to buy a car. They can just get transportation from the public transportation. They can get from Uber. They can even rent handbags online. There are service providers that do that. Is home ownership for everyone in the future? Or is this a fact that was created to fulfill a traditional need of security as you move forward?
That's an excellent question. And in terms of what the future brings, it's hard to predict. But let me perhaps take a little bit step back. And the traditional view of housing goes something like this, right? Is that I work, I save my money, I buy a house, so that when I retire and I have less money coming in, at the very least I have a roof over my head. And that is a very understandable sentiment for most people, because what do you do when you're retired and you have no more money coming in? You need a roof over your head. And the idea that if you say people should rent all the time, then when I retire and I have no more money coming in, how can I pay the rent? So again, there's this idea of owning a house as a security for the future. You could make the case that maybe a house is not the best investment for the future. You could make the case that maybe I should put it in a unit trust or amanah saham or some other diversified means of investing. So rather than investing in a house for my retirement, I should maybe invest in mutual funds or amanah saham, something like that, and then just pay rent in the meantime. We are looking at this to see what it looks like. But for the vast majority of people, the security of owning the place you live is still a very important concern. But I agree, in the future, people who have grown up more comfortable with investing, more comfortable with the choices which internet banking and the choices you get now online in terms of investments may have a totally different view about it, and maybe we could get to a situation where people save for their future, not through buying a house, but through some other way.
You make me feel very relieved.
Yeah.
I also looking at the trend of buying properties or buying houses as an investment. I'm sure that has also an effect on the housing affordability or house prices in Malaysia. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we have a very technical appendix to here. I mean, we try to make this accessible to the non-economists, but there's some things where you are quite heavy-duty economics. So we have an appendix at the end where we run through economic theory on the effect of speculation on housing prices, and there seems to be clear. Well, there seems to be both from a theoretical point of view and from a kind of data point of view that speculators. Well, speculators, I mean someone who buys a house with no intention intention to live in it or no intention to keep it for very long can drive up prices, which is why one of our recommendations in here is that if we were to make the structural changes and come up with cheaper houses which come up quickly, we should in the early years have a moratorium. In other words, if someone, in return for getting a more affordable house, the buyer says, I won't sell it for 5 years. And the reason we're doing that is so that people don't buy it to then sell it again at a high price, which would defeat the purpose of having it. But after a while, we won't need this moratorium, because if enough houses come up at a low price, then we won't have to keep a moratorium. And there's no point speculating if I speculate by buying a house today, hoping to sell it for a higher price tomorrow because there are not enough houses. But if there's a steady supply of new houses coming out, then speculation, at least at that market level, will cease.
Okay, I have some pictures I want to share with you. I printed this off the internet, and I will share these pictures with you. Maybe these are future houses or homes that we can consider, because these houses are not the 20 by 70 traditional definition of houses that we have in Malaysia, that we're looking at year after year. Because I think as the population grows, and you mentioned yourself, that the size of household are getting smaller and smaller.
That's right.
Can we look at this as an alternative to the traditional definition of house? We create our own definition of housing or houses moving forward. Can we at least look at it? Because I think we've been discussing future cities and creating more technology-driven innovation for living.
No, yes, because I think in an ideal world, if you want, there'll be multiple choices available. Given a certain budget, you can find the type of living accommodation you want. And you're right, in terms of young people who are living alone, we have a rising number of single-member households. In other words, people living alone. So yeah, I mean, a house suitable or a dwelling suitable for someone living alone and someone with children is different, and you can't expect there to be just one product for everyone. Yes, I think we will have a variety of housing products, and the examples you've shown. Again, it will depend. In some places where there is sufficient land, we could be able to houses like this. But in some places, we may have no choice but to just build upwards, in which case people will still live in apartments and in apartments. But in a well-functioning housing market, that choice should be available at different price points.
And what future trends should we prepare for, be prepared for moving forward in terms of home ownership and in terms of property developers? What trends should we be prepared for?
Well, what we hope is that we will have a more responsive housing market where houses can be built more efficiently at a lower cost and faster. With that responsive housing market, we hope, therefore, that overall there will be affordable housing at different price points. And I have to stress this different price points because we talk about the median income, but there's a whole range. There's some people who earn less than the median income, and some people earn more than median income. So we should have a housing market which caters to all those needs. A bit like the car market. You can buy a small car at a lower price, or a very big car at a very high price, or a very small car, sports car, at a very, very high price, depending on what your needs are and what your income is. So the ideal situation would be to have a housing market like that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shahrul Ramazani.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much for discussing housing affordability in Malaysia, and we look forward to more reports from Khazanah Research Institute. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Shahrul Ramazani of Khazanah Research Institute discussing housing affordability in Malaysia. And this is Rizal Sokapli. Thank you very much for joining us for the past half an hour. Salam hormat.